Okay, we're here. 1 Samuel chapter 13. And we'll have a word of prayer and jump into this. Father God, we're so thankful tonight to be able to come into your house and grateful, Lord, for the way that you care for us. But most of all, we're thankful for your word. The promises that you make to us and the power that we see constantly in your working. Strengthen our faith and give us an encouragement that when things go south and times are hard, that you remain faithful in your promise to care for us. I pray we see that tonight as we study your word in Jesus' name. Amen. The purpose of chapters 13, 14, and 15 is to document the deterioration of the reign of Saul. People who are, I forget the word that's used, but Doris Day sang about it in that song, Que Sera, Sera, that life just happens without any changing, that God's not in control. It's just your fate determines. Yes, whatever will be, will be. Those people, they think that Saul was ruined from the beginning. That God had allowed him to be chosen just to show God's people how dumb they were. That Saul had no chance whatsoever to be a good king. And we're going to see here that that's not true. Saul's deterioration wasn't because of something that God had done. It was something that Saul had done. Increment by increment, one bad choice after another results in him being disqualified. So, we also then, with that, come to understand why David is chosen to be king. So, glad you guys could make it. We're in 1 Samuel 13 as soon as you sit down. So, Tim, will you read chapter 13, verses 1 through 7?
Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel 42 years. Saul chose 3,000 men from Israel, 2,000 were with him at Michmash in the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gibeah in Benjamin. The rest of the men he sent back to their homes. Jonathan attacked the Philistine outpost at Gibeah, and the Philistines heard about it. Then Saul had the trumpet blown throughout the land and said, "Let the Hebrews hear." So all Israel heard the news. Saul had attacked the Philistine outpost, and now Israel has become obnoxious to the Philistines. And the people were summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore, and went up and camped at Michmash, east of Beth-aven. When the Israelites saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard-pressed, they hid in the caves and thickets, among the rocks, and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead.
And there's a little more on 7.
Saul remained in Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear.
Shaking in their boots. Now, at least in the New American Standard, you will notice in verse 1 that the word 30 and the word 40 are in italics. You got that in yours? So what that means is, in the Hebrew, when this was written, they did not put in those numbers. Legend had it that he reigned for 42 years, but there isn't any verse in the Hebrew that documents Saul's reign. Now, the problem with him being 30 when he began to reign is that when he began to reign, and you see it here in verse 3, Jonathan was in control, ahead of his own group. You were not allowed to be ahead. I mean, even as a king's son, you had to be 20 years old before you could serve in the Israelite army. So if Saul began to reign when he was 30, and Jonathan was 20, that doesn't fit. I mean, he would have had to have Jonathan when he was 10. And that's young, even for West Virginia. That's young. It's more likely that Saul was 40 when he began to reign. But he didn't reign 40 years, he reigned 20 years. Died when he was 60. If Saul was 40 when he began to reign, Jonathan would have been 20 when he served with his dad, and David would have been 10. There's 10 years between David and Jonathan's age group. So remember that, and we don't know because the Bible doesn't tell us. So it's all speculation. But certainly he couldn't have been 30. It's just logistically impossible. Because he would have had to have Jonathan when he was 10 years old. And what kind of a mother lets their daughter marry a 10-year-old? I mean, it's just insane. Oh, so what it says here is, in sometimes there's a footnote in your Bibles that in verse 2, when Saul had reigned 2 years over Israel, he chose for himself these men. And they divided them up. They kept, of the 3,000, Saul kept 2,000. And Jonathan was in charge of 1,000. Now, if you're one of those analytical thinkers and you're always, reading between the lines, like you might be thinking, we just read about them fighting the Ammonites, and they had 330,000. How on earth, if they had that many and they could defeat the Ammonites, why didn't they defeat the Philistines? And we don't have it here, but in a map, at this point in time, Israel was not united as one nation. They were all divided in these separate groups. The Ammonites are on the east side of the Jordan River. The Philistines are completely on the other side of the country along the Mediterranean Sea. So the Philistines wouldn't be concerned. Huh. Yes. You see where it says Gad and Manasseh? That's where the Ammonites would have been. And along the Mediterranean is where the Philistines, especially down here at the bottom where it's got Gaza, because that was one of the Philistine outposts. And so the thinking is the Philistines weren't too concerned about how many they could amass to defeat the Ammonites, because the Philistines still had them under their thumb. 330,000 is probably an exaggeration. And the Philistines would want to keep Israel somewhat armed, but not dangerous, because then they act as a buffer to all of those tribes that would come from the east or the north. So, Philistines are still have their thumb on Israel. And Saul has resigned himself to this, perfectly content. He's got 3,000 people he can act like he's in charge of, and they don't do much, but they don't upset the apple cart. They fall in line with the Philistines. But Jonathan is not like his dad. Jonathan is more like David. And as you read through this, you're going to begin to see why David and Jonathan had such a close relationship. 10 years difference, but they were so alike. Saul was not spiritual at all. Jonathan was. Saul lived in fear. Jonathan lived by faith. So when Jonathan has 1,000 men under him, he's thinking to himself, I don't know what these Philistines think they're doing. They don't belong in the land. So he takes his group and they go to the Philistines and they whoop them. Well, Saul doesn't, in verse 3, Saul doesn't want people to think that Jonathan's in control or that Jonathan's the leader. So Saul blows the trumpet and he says, I want to tell you something. You've got to assemble because the Philistines are after us. I think probably 30,000 chariots is also an exaggeration. They can't find in history any civilization, including Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, and Greece, that had 30,000 chariots in their arsenal. That's a lot of chariots. I mean, you have to have some big barns.
The historians also say that they don't think that this city existed, but then later they find out, oh, it did. In fact, it's right where the Bible says it was. And there's all kinds of stuff like that, geological evidence.
I'm just suggesting that maybe this number is a little inflated, but it was a huge number for that time, and they had assembled, the Philistine had assembled all these chariots as a show of force, so that everybody knows big dog is in town. And we do that today, don't we? You got United States, Presence felt, Persian Gulf. We send in our ships just for a show of strength? So here we got the chariots. And when the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, they got this show of strength really disturbed them. They went into hiding. And some of them even crossed the Jordan and went into the other lands away from the Philistines. God had told Samuel to tell Saul, when there's trouble brewing as king, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to Gilgal. Gilgal, again, is such a strategic center because it was the place, and it's not on that one, but Gilgal was the place where Israel crossed the Jordan before they attacked Jericho. It's where they set up the monument in the water, and then they sent the monument on the land. It was a strategic place that they came to time and again. God said to Samuel to tell Saul, anytime trouble brews, I want you to go to Gilgal, and I want you to wait 7 days. He's real specific. I want you to wait 7 days. And then I'm going to tell you what I want you to do. And Samuel, I want you to remind Saul that he might be king of Israel, but I'm commander-in-chief. Saul, you need to understand this. You might be wearing the crown, but I'm the one that turns your head. All right? So, here we go. Esther, are you ready to read? Okay. Read verses 8 through 14, please, of chapter 13.
He waited 7 days, according to the time set by Samuel. Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So Saul said, bring a burnt offering and peace offering in here to me. And he offered the burnt offering. Now it happened, as soon as he had finished presenting the burnt offering, that Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him, that he might greet him. And Samuel said, what are you doing? What have you done? And Saul said, when I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered together at Michmash, then I said, the Philistines will now come down on me at Gilgal, and I have not made supplication to the Lord. Therefore, I felt compelled and offered the burnt offering. And Samuel said to Saul, you have done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. For now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be commander over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you.
Okay. Now, if you remember, when they attacked the Ammonites and had that tremendous victory, the Spirit of God came on Saul. He cut up the animal in 12 pieces, sent it out through Israel, and all those people responded. He had been anointed, but he had not been coronated yet. When we get to chapter 13, he's just had his coronation. He's just starting his reign. Wait 7 days. We don't know if that meant the seventh day until 7 a.m. or the seventh day until 2 p.m. or the seventh day until 11:59 p.m. Wait 7 days. If you go over 1 hour, I'm going to charge you 19. No, that's not it. One day. So 7 days, according to Saul, and Samuel doesn't show up. I love this. Look at the end of verse 12. It says, I didn't want to do it. I forced myself. I didn't want to do this sacrifice business. I forced myself. Yeah. I don't think anybody was standing there because they were running away. He didn't force himself. He got scared like the rest of these people. And it's just so amazing, his language. God said I was supposed to wait for Samuel for 7 days. And I was so worried, Sam, because you didn't show up in time, that the Philistines were going to ruin me. And I hadn't found favor with God, so I sinned and offered a sacrifice. Samuel says, can you hear yourself, Saul? Do you hear what you're saying? You're worried about displeasing God, so you commit a sin? Wow.
Who did he offer this burnt offering to?
God. But he's not a priest. And Samuel said, I'll do the offering around here. So, I mean, you just got to see this in real life and think to yourself, oh my word, Saul must have just been beside himself because he's just got the sacrifice going. He's killed the animal. He's put it on the altar to burn. And here's Samuel. And he doesn't say, good job, buddy. Way to take control. He says, what have you done? Well, I thought, that's your first problem, Saul. Stop thinking. So, notice in verse 14, here's what I was talking about at the beginning. What does verse 14 tell us about Saul and his reign? Before it says that, it says what?
You could have reigned forever.
You could have reigned forever. See, the only thing written in stone is that God keeps his word. His promises are as sure as the sun coming up tomorrow. And if he says that he is going to win in the end, he is. We constantly, because we know these stories, we're always thinking, well, Saul didn't have a chance because David's got to be king. David's got to kill Goliath. David's got to do this. David's got to do that. God had plan B in the works before the foundation of the world. Because God did not make Saul sin, but God knew that Saul was going to sin. And so, look at what it says in verse 14. God had already appointed your successor. At the most, David was 10 years old when God said that. There's a chance that David wasn't even born yet. Because when we're thinking about these ages of these guys, you know, there's a a gap here, 5-10 years difference, give or take. When God said through Samuel to Saul, I have already appointed the next king, Samuel didn't know who it was. David sure didn't know who it was. He was just 10. At the oldest, he was 10. Samuel, you and your family could have had a dynasty. And you blew it. You blew it. Why? Because you didn't have enough faith to believe that Sam was going to show up in 7 days. Well, I waited 6 days and 20 hours. No, not good enough. All right. Renee, would you read verses 15 through 23?
Then Samuel left Gilgal and went up to Gibeath in Bethlehem. And Saul counted the men who were with him. They numbered about 600. Saul and his son Jonathan and the men with them were staying in Gibeath in Benjamin, while the Philistines camped at Michmash. Raiding parties went out from the Philistine camp in 3 detachments. One turned toward Opah in the vicinity of Shaul, another toward Beth Huron, and the third toward the borderland overlooking the valley of Lebanon facing the desert. Not a blacksmith could be found in the whole land of Israel, because the Philistines had said, otherwise the Israelites will make swords and spears. So all Israel went down to the Philistines to have their plowshares, mattocks, axes, and sickles sharpened. The price was 2/3 of a shekel for sharpening plowshares and mattocks, and 1/3 of a shekel for sharpening forks and axes, and for repointing goads. So on the day of the battle, not a soldier with Saul and Jonathan had a sword or a spear in his hand. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had them. Now a detachment of Philistines had gone out to the pass at Michmash.
Okay. Sometimes you wonder why the writer writes like this. Why do you suppose he put in there verses 19, 20, and 21?
Because otherwise they would have had weapons made by blacksmiths.
Yeah. He's trying to emphasize why Israel had no weapons. Not only would the Philistines not make them, the Israelites couldn't afford them. But I got to tell you, when I read the first verse of verse 19, all I can think about is walking into Lowe's or Home Depot. Not a salesperson is there to help you. You walk in there and, man, you're alone. Yes. You're walking up and down the aisles like you're lost, because you are. You don't know where to go. And there's nobody there to help you. I think of that every time I read first part of verse 19. But that's beyond it. Oh, so here they are. They don't have any weapons. Only Jonathan and Saul have weapons. Catch that part. The only two that got weapons. Chuck, would you read 1 through 5 in chapter 14?
Now the day came that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who was carrying his armor, "Come and let us cross over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree which is in Migron. And the people who were with him were about 600 men. And Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest of the Lord at Shiloh, was wearing an ephod. And the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. Between the passes by which Jonathan sought to cross over the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp crag on the one side and a sharp crag on the other. And the name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other was Seneh. The one crag rose to the north, on the north opposite Mishmash, and the other on the south opposite Geba.
Okay. We've got this slit in the rocks, these gorges. Seneh means thorny. There was a whole bunch of berry bushes and thistles and crab trees and all of that stuff that just scratches you. The northern cliff was called Bozez, and that means shining or slippery. It was devoid of vegetation, so both sides were hard to navigate. Saul's down here, sitting under a tree, sipping mint julep, lemonade, whatever they can bring, that's good tasting, because he's working hard. He had 2,000 men under control. Now he only has 600 because everybody else has run away. The Philistines have these raiding parties that come in. They're off raiding. The main army is over here. And up on this top where these gorges go up, the cliffs go up on top, there is a regiment, kind of a watching party that is watching all of the movement of these Israelites. Jonathan, he's been there a while, and he says, you know what would be fun? Let's climb up. Let's climb up, because they'll never expect it. Never in 100 years will they think that anybody would even try to climb up this gorge. Let's climb up there and kill them. Okay. Jim, would you read verses 6 through 15?
Then Jonathan said to the young man who was carrying his armor, "Come and let us cross over the garrison of these uncircumcised. Perhaps the Lord will work for us. For the Lord is not restrained to save by many or by few." His armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Turn yourself, and here I am with you according to your desire." Then Jonathan said, "Behold, we will cross over to the men and reveal ourselves to them. If they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand in our place and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up. For the Lord has given them into our hands, and this shall be the sign to us." When both of them revealed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines said, "Behold, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden themselves." So the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Come up to us, and we will tell you something." And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hands of Israel." Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet with his armor bearer behind him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer put some to death after him. That first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor bearer made was about 20 men within about half a furrow in an acre of land. And there was a trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people, even the garrison and the raiders trembled, and the earth quaked so that it became a great trembling.
Now, I want you to see Jonathan's faith here. In verse 6, how does that describe where Jonathan's faith is at?
Nothing can hinder the Lord.
Absolutely. And what is specifically, because he's not commanding God, he says perhaps God, but the very last part of verse 6, Jonathan expresses the thought that we all should have, and that is, ultimately, who's responsible for our success? God, not many. Your success doesn't depend on how many you have, how strong they are, how well connected they may be, or how rich. It's whether they're God. He's the one. So Jonathan says to his armor bearer, let's climb up there. And his armor bearer, man, this guy is something else. I'll tell you what. He's got a lot of faith in Jonathan. He says, okay, you go, I'll follow. I'll be right behind you. So when Jonathan says, and this is how we're going to do it. When we start climbing up, if they come down, which is just idiotic because, I mean, it is a treacherous climb. Why would you risk trying to go down? If you wanted to get rid of these two, throw a couple of boulders down the gorge. It'll take care of them. So Jonathan says, if they start to come down, we're not going to do anything. We're safe. But if they happen to say, hey, come on up here, we want to tell you something, we're going, because that's God's sign that He has given us the victory. Oh, man. In verse 11, the Philistines, they've got their own slang. They've got their own terms of making fun of people or talking down to people. And for Philistines, if you wanted to really insult an Israelite, just call him a Hebrew. They hated that word. Hey, these Hebrews are coming out of their hole. So, climbs up, hands and feet, and an acre was determined in that day and age by the amount of land that one ox pulling a plow could turn over in a day. Because oxen aren't real fast. Faster than I would be pulling a plow, but they were not fast. So the distance, the area that one ox could pull a plow, turn over the field, that was an acre. And these 20 guys were on half an acre. And the ones that Jonathan didn't kill, he might have given them a couple of flesh wounds or, knocked them out. The armor bearer took care of. And he had to wait for Jonathan to kill the first Philistine. Why? He needed the sword. He didn't have one. Kills the first guy. Here, take this. So he's killed these guys. And I want you to try and visualize this, because all of a sudden they feel an earthquake, and when they look up to where the Philistine army was, not this camp here, but over onto the hills, the best way that I can describe it is, and I don't know if they even do it anymore, but back in the 70s, 80s, and I guess still the 90s, have you ever been to a stadium when they've done the wave? And it just moves, and you can see it, right? That's the image that I get here, in addition to this earthquake. Brian, you got your reading glasses on? Okay. So read 16 through 23, please.
Chapter 14.
Yeah.
Now Saul's watchmen in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went here and there. Saul said to the people who were with him, Number now, and see who has gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. Then Saul said to Abijah, Bring the ark of God here, for the ark of God was at that time with the sons of Israel. While Saul talked to the priest, the commotion in the camp of the Philistines continued and increased. So Saul said to the priest, Withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was very great confusion. Now the Hebrews who were with the Philistines previously, who went up with them all around in the camp, even they also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. Then all the men of Israel who were hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines had fled. Even they also pursued them closely in the battle. So the Lord delivered Israel that day, and the battle spread beyond Bethaven.
Jonathan starts this momentum, and when those 20 fall, God sends an earthquake, and the ground starts moving. That contributes to this scene as they see these Philistines. They're just falling in waves. Thousands of these soldiers just falling down in waves. Because of the confusion and the earthquakes, I want you to see this. Verse 20, every man's sword was against his fellow. Who are they talking about? The Philistines were killing Philistines because the Israelites had no swords. Saul says to the priest, come over here. I want you to ask God what's going on. He said, because there's something going on. I can hear it. And then he sees this great number of Philistines just dropping like flies, and he says to the priest, forget it. I don't need you. I know what's going on. And he joins in. You had Israelites, traitors, who had gone with the Philistines and were fighting with them. They turned and fought against them. You had Saul and his 600. Then you had all of the cowards that were hiding in the bushes and in the crevices, plus the ones that were on the east side of the Jordan River. When they hear that the Philistines are being whooped up on, everybody joins in. And in verse 23, who gets the credit? God. Yes, God. He did it. Oh, man. I love that. When Saul hears this commotion and sees what's going on, before he calls the priest, he says, I want you to, because there's only 600 of us, I want you to count who's missing. He knew who was missing. It was his boy, and he knew him. So when it says, behold, that it was a no-brainer. Duh, Jonathan's missing, because that was the kind of guy he was. No fear. Boy, that's why he is going to take to David like a bear to honey. Man, those two were just alike. And so, Saul, he's not done being a knucklehead. We still got more to go. Are you ready? Would you read in chapter 14, verses 24 through 30.
Now the men of Israel were hard pressed on that day, for Saul had put the people under oath, saying, Cursed be the man who eats food before evening, and until I have avenged myself on the enemies, so none of the people tasted food. So all the people of the land entered the forest, and there were honey on the ground. When the people entered the forest before, there was a flow of honey, but no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard when his father put the people under oath. Therefore, he put out the end of the staff that was in his hand, and dipped it in the honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and eyes brightened. Then one of the people said, Your father strictly put the people under oath, saying, Cursed be the man who eats food today. And the people were worried. Then Jonathan said, My father has troubled the land. See now how my eyes have brightened, because I tasted a little of the honey. So how much more if only the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of the enemy which they found. For now the slaughter among the Philistines has not been great.
When God was taking care of the Philistines, it was a great slaughter. And Israel joined in, and Saul, thinking that he's in control, he's just thinking. He's always thinking. And that's why he's always in trouble. He says, man, I've turned this around. We are just beating the tar out of these Philistines. I'm going to have an oath. Nobody eats anything until I have avenged myself. Wait a minute. Why are you avenging yourself, Saul? This whole battle hasn't been about you. You didn't even start it. So the people are afraid because he's king. But there was one person in the group who hadn't been with the group. Jonathan. Sees a little honey on the ground. Now I know some of you guys are just, germ freaks. I mean, something falls down, something comes off the counter, lands on the kitchen floor. You probably pick it up and throw it away, don't you? Yeah, not me. I was raised on the farm. You don't let good food go to waste. So, if you're cutting up, making a chicken sandwich, and some of the chicken hits the floor, I go right after it. And dirt don't hurt, that's right. So he picks this honey up and tastes it, and they said, uh-oh, shame on you. Your dad said, we're under a curse if we eat anything. And Jonathan says, my dad is a knucklehead. Okay? I hate to put it that way, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just a goof. And look, if he would have allowed you all to eat, I mean, they were mopping up, these Philistines were running, they had dropped their sandwiches, a couple of them had Happy Meals and they just left it behind. They had watermelon, they had fried chicken, they had potato salad, they had baked beans. I mean, they had all of this stuff. Don't eat it. No. Under a curse. Jonathan said, what would have happened if we would have just had a little bit of a snack, you know? A Big Mac here. And verse 30 says, the slaughter among the Philistines had not been great. Okay. So, they're wore out. His next move, Kim, you're up 31 through 35.
35.
Yeah.
They struck among the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ajalon, and the people were very weary. The people rushed greedily upon the spoil, and took sheep and oxen and calves, and slew them on the ground. And the people ate them with the blood. Then they told Saul, saying, behold, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating of the blood. And he said, you have acted treacherously. Roll a great stone to me today. Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, each one of you bring me his ox or his sheep, and slaughter it here and eat. And do not sin against the Lord by eating of the blood. So all the people that night brought each one his ox with him and slaughtered it there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar that he built to the Lord.
When they finally stop pursuing the Philistines, they're tired, they're hungry, they're cranky, and we're not going to fight anymore. So they just take these animals that were left behind, and as they're slaughtering them, they're slaughtering them on the ground. That means that as they are field dressing these animals, slicing off what they're going to cook and eat, it's on the ground and it's in the blood. Saul says, get me a big stone over here. Then when they put the animal on the stone and begin to field dress it and slice it off, the blood's drained off because the carcass is elevated. That's permissible. Yeah, there's still blood. But you see, it's not sitting in the blood. It's up here and the blood's drained off. They get done eating, and he builds an altar, probably using that stone or at least some of the wood around there. Jojo, 36 through 42.
And Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and take spoil among them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatever seems good to you. So the priest said, let us draw near to God here. Saul inquired of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him on that day. Saul said, draw near here, all you chiefs of the people, and investigate and see how this sin has happened today. For as the Lord lives, who delivers Israel, though it is in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. But not one of all the people answered him. Then he said to all Israel, you shall be on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side. And the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. Through 41 you said?
Yep. No, through 42.
Through 42. Therefore Saul said to the Lord, the God of Israel, give a perfect lot. And Jonathan and Saul were taken, but the people escaped. Saul said, cast lots between me and Jonathan my son. And Jonathan was taken.
Okay. Now, verse 36, they've had their meal. And Saul says, okay, let's get up, let's finish this, let's pursue the Philistines until we've killed every single one of them. And the people said, hey, that's a great idea. But the priest in verse 36 says what? Yeah. Ahijah is thinking, he said, I don't remember any time that God said, annihilate the Philistines. He's talked about other people. We're even going to see that coming up. But he never said annihilate the Philistines. So Ahijah says, I think we should ask God. Saul says, okay, call him. And he calls, goes straight to voicemail. Nobody answering the phone. It doesn't. And Saul says, uh-oh, if God's not talking to us, there's a sinner in the camp. I think he's wearing the crown, but I, jumping to conclusions. He says, so we're going to cast lots and we're going to find out who the sinner is. You see, no, this isn't in the Bible. Okay, so listen careful, Brian, because this isn't in the Bible. This is just my humble opinion, all right? I think Saul and his personality, he started out so well, and then he's just deteriorating at a rapid rate. I think that he's jealous of his own son. And when he was jealous of David, what was he constantly trying to do to David? Kill him. Okay, I'm just saying. Jonathan was taken. Sally, hi. Verses 43 through 46.
Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. So Jonathan told him, I tasted a little honey with the end of my staff, and now I must die. Saul said, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan. But the men said to Saul, should Jonathan die? He who has brought about the great deliverance in Israel? Never. As surely as the Lord lives, not a hair on his head will fall to the ground, for he did this today with God's help. So the men rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Then Saul stopped pursuing the Philistines, and they withdrew to their own land.
The lot was cast and Jonathan was taken, and he said, guilty. Kill me. That oath wasn't a God oath. God's not the one that had that oath. That was Saul. And so when Jonathan says, hey, kill me, Saul says, all right. What kind of a dad does that? It's just crazy. So the people said, no deal. Because listen, Saul, this might come as a newsflash to you, but you weren't responsible for this battle. Jonathan's the one that started it. Jonathan is the one that's been following God, and God's the one that gave us the victory, not you. And you're not going to touch that boy. So he said, okay, I'll try again later. And that's it. Next week. Next week we see more folly from Saul.